Welcome to the International Women's Day Symposium on Women Leadership in Tech and Investment, co-sponsored by the Library of Congress and Parliament 51. My name is Natalie Burkloff, and I am Head of Business Reference in the Science, Technology, and Business Division. And it's great to see you all. This is one of our larger in-person events we've had in a few years, so it's so nice to see your faces. I'm excited that we have a fantastic array of speakers, and I also want to thank Wiz and Daz for breakfast and being sponsors of this event, along with Parliament 51 and the artist Talia Zoref, whose images you've seen on the slides around the room this morning. So first, I would like to introduce you to Kate Zward, who will share a few words on behalf of the Library of Congress. Kate Zward is the library's first associate librarian for discovery and preservation services, where she leads more than 600 employees responsible for acquisitions, cataloging, preservation, and discovery of library collections. Before this position, she was the library's first director of digital strategy, shepherding digital transformation across the institution. Under her leadership, the library launched the crowdsourcing program By the People, which invites the public to engage with and improve access to library collections. Previously, she served as the first chief of National Digital Initiatives, where she launched LC Labs, the library's digital innovation team, which incubated popular experiments like Citizen DJ and Newspaper Navigator. Zward joined the library in 2012 as a software engineering manager, developing systems for digital collections management. Kate?
Thank you so much, Natalie. It's so exciting to see all of you here. It's such a wonderful, fills my heart with joy to be here for this event. And on behalf of the Library of Congress, we're honored to have such major leaders and entrepreneurs in technology, finance, and artificial intelligence here today to discuss increasing the number of women in leadership positions, investing in female entrepreneurs, and promoting gender equality and equity in the workplace. Our keynote speaker is a self-described mad scientist using artificial intelligence to solve problems in the real world. Other panelists have held leadership roles at places like NASDAQ, Audible, Intuit, and Microsoft before starting their own successful companies, championing diversity, inclusion, and equity as vital parts of the work they do. It's really important for us here at the Library of Congress to host these conversations around gender equity and equality. I think for two reasons. One is as a workplace, and one is as a place of research. So we're a workplace here. We have over 3,000 employees, and 56% of those identify as female. And librarianship as a whole is often described as a pink-collared profession. About 80% of librarians identify as women, but we are still proportionally underrepresented in library management positions. And we ourselves here at the Library of Congress have some work to do. To that end, we've established a task force that's working to identify and address barriers to full participation of all demographic groups at all levels of the institution. And the other is as a place of research. The service unit I lead, Discovery and Preservation Services, has a central charge to improve user discovery by leveraging new metadata, digitization, and preservation workflows as electronic and digital collections expand. And I'm thinking you'll hear today about attacks on being different. And I'm thinking about that in terms of how the library is working to collect and provide access to subjects and groups that have been historically underrepresented in our collections. We're working on the future of bibliographic description in terms of sensitive description practices, modernizing our subject headings so that they reflect modern language of our researchers, that our researchers use to find materials that they're looking for, expanding our collection of STEM topics in the web archives. We want to make sure that the library's collection and practices for access reflect the diversity of human experiences and research needs. And while we have an impressive and wonderful historic collection, we also strive to be future thinking and capture current ideas, whether in print, visual, or audio. I'm proud to say that the talks today will be part of the collection, which I think is so exciting. Like most women, this topic is intensely personal to me. My mother was one of the first female volunteer firefighters in my home state, and I remember being astonished as a child at the barriers people put up to her participation in service. All she wanted to do was serve her community, and she was told, well, all the bathrooms here have urinals in the firehouse, so you can't be a firefighter. And it really inspired me as a kid to think about the unfairness and injustice of that, and think about small and large ways that I could participate in equity. In my own career, I've often been the only or one of the only women in the room when I was in software development. And there are things like you're surprised at the patterns of communication styles that you see, and how sort of the dominant way of managing conflict can disproportionately affect underrepresented people in the room. And now in my role as Associate Librarian of Discovery and Preservation Services, I think those experiences have really shaped me positively and helped me grow. I take equity issues very seriously, and I'm proud to use my own experience as a mom in a demanding position to bring perspectives around conversations around workplace flexibility, for example. But I also lean on my experience to remember that my understanding isn't universal, and I need to look to other minority voices to uplift their needs and their understanding and their lived experience as well. That said, it's wonderful that we all can come together today to celebrate International Women's Day and to be inspired and to be provoked. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to the Science, Technology, and Business Division for organizing this incredible event. I'll turn it back over to Natalie for introductions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kate. I'd next like to introduce our partners. I had the pleasure of meeting Danielle Ofak last summer during her visit to the Science and Business Reading Room. From day one, I have admired Danielle's entrepreneurial mindset, her limitless energy, and her belief that all things are possible, which she has convinced me of. So Danielle shares her passion for gender equality with Liri Halpern-Segal. Together, they co-founded Parliament 51, which is a social impact venture that aims to achieve gender equality and equal opportunities for women in the workplace in leadership positions. To that end, Parliament 51 created their Statement of Principles, Women in the Workplace Standard, which commits companies to narrowing leadership gender gaps. Parliament 51 is partnering in this event, and I'd like to turn it over to Danielle and Liri for a few remarks. Without them, this event would not be possible. Thanks.
Hi, good morning, everyone. On this International Women's Day, I will start with a statement. I am confident that if every nation was run by women, you would see a remarkable improvement across the world. In companies, in politics, in society, everywhere. We cannot give up. We are at a critical time globally. I pledge to continue my efforts to help more women attain leadership positions, and by that, creating an equal, strong, and better world. Women comprise 51% of the world's population, making up half of its potential. Women still struggle to reach leadership positions. Only 10% women CEOs at Fortune 500. Currently, about 11% women sit as the head of state or government. And to all women out there, no matter where you are, do not listen to rejection. Do not listen to rejection. If you work hard and you put your mind to it, you can achieve anything that life throws your way. Never let anyone break your spirit and maximize your potential. I found that nothing in life is worthwhile unless you take risks. Nelson Mandela said, "There is no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that's less than the one you are capable of living." Today, we celebrate the progress we've made in advancing gender equality while recognizing the work that still needs to be done. As the founders of Parliament 51, Liri and myself, we've been committed to promoting women and diversity in the workplace, and I'm proud to say that over the past 5 years, we've made significant strides towards achieving that goal.
According to a study by McKinsey, companies with more diverse executive teams, including more women in leadership positions, tend to perform better financially. Research has shown that women leaders tend to display more transformational leadership behaviors, such as empowering their employees and fostering a sense of innovation and creativity in the workplace. Women leaders have been shown to be more effective in crisis management, which studies indicate that countries led by women experience fewer COVID-19 deaths and better economic outcomes than those who led by men. However, in 2023, women still face significant obstacles like a gender pay gap, like access to quality healthcare and education. Our ultimate goal is a world where we don't need to celebrate International Women's Day because women's rights and opportunities are equal to those of men. We want to take a moment to thank the Library of Congress for its cooperation and organization and the support. It was great to work with you. Thank you so much. And we want to encourage all of you to continue the fight for gender equality, both in your personal and professional lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie.
I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Vivienne Ming. Dr. Ming was interviewed last year in Forbes magazine in a piece titled, "A Force in AI Unlike Any We Have Seen Before," which the title alone should give you a sense of her brilliance. In the article, as she answered questions about the future of artificial intelligence, she emphasized the importance of heterogeneity. I'm sorry, I even wrote that down. Heterogeneity in the population, relaying, if your model tells you there's one kind of person, you've got the wrong model, because there's nothing about humans that is one single experience. It is with that frame today that I hope this symposium brings together multiple experiences to discuss investing in women, promoting gender equality and equity in the workplace. To specifically highlight Dr. Ming's experience, she is a neuroscientist, entrepreneur, inventor, and artificial intelligence expert. Over her career, she has founded 6 startups, been chief scientist at 2 others, and launched a mad science incubator, Socos Labs, where she explores seemingly intractable problems for free. As the co-founder and chief scientist of Dionysus Health, she applies machine learning to lessen the corrosive health effects of chronic stress in communities. She also develops tools for learning at home and in school and with TBI, models of bias in hiring and promotion, and neurotechnologies to treat dementia, an outgrowth of her research at UC Berkeley's Redwood Center for Theoretical Neuroscience. Today, she'll be talking about the tax on being different, using HR, data, and rewriting issues of bias and discrimination in order to understand and quantify what your differences are costing you. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ming.
Some of you have wisely chosen to hide, so you don't have to look at this for the next 35 minutes. Really, I don't feel comfortable unless I've got a solid 4 hours in front of me. I usually don't stop until people start crying. I also feel a little, I'm in the Pope Mobile, but it's run out of gas. It's just trapped in plexiglass here. I like pacing because it creates the illusion that I'm dynamic and interesting. So, oh my God, 35 minutes, and I've already eroded the idea that I'm charming. So, gosh, International Women's Day. How about we start here? I'm in Washington, D.C. What's my lone interesting claim to fame for D.C.? There's a White House policy because of me, literally because of me. My wife and I went, I think, to the first ever Pride celebration at the White House. And I swear to God, I asked the Secret Service ahead of time, is it okay if I wear these special glasses to the White House? Google Glass, you know, the computer And someone said yes. So I throw these things on, and I walk, I go past the bum-sniffing dogs and walk in, and the Secret Service freaked out. All right, I won't go blue because there's some kids. But this enormous man with like the curly Q thing coming out of his ear walked up to me because my wife and I were stuffing hors d'oeuvres in our purses because the White House throws a good party, and it doesn't have to stop when you leave. And I thought we were busted for stealing food, but it turns out he just walks up and says, "Is that Google Glass?" And I said, "Yes." "And it takes photos?" "Yeah." "And it does video?" I'm like, does he want me to hook him up? What's going on here? Because I got in this early release pair to come up with things to do with it. But he just simply says, "Please don't live stream the president." Because President Obama and Vice President Biden were both there at the time. It's the only time I've actually met President Biden, who has the largest, whitest teeth of any human being I have ever met. It seems so disrespectful, but there's a part of me that wanted to put like a sugar cube and just hold it out. But he seems so nice. So I was wearing Google Glass, and I said, of course I won't live stream the president. What I didn't realize is that behind the scenes, they had gone berserk and had literally wasted the time of the most powerful man in the world to decide whether I should get kicked out for wearing, admittedly, a fluorescent blue live camera on my head at a fancy party. But instead, he wanted to meet me. So, in fact, the Secret Service came out, pushed everyone else away, and out of this little door, we were standing right next to the portrait of John Kennedy, and this little door pops open, and the President of the United States is standing in front of me, and he just looks at me, shakes his head like, God, lady, have some dignity. What is this thing? And so my first words to the President of the United States was, "Okay, Glass, take a picture." Because it was voice activated. So Google has confirmed it is the only presidential portrait ever taken with Google Glass. It's a terrible photo. It's like a demonstration of why this was a disastrous product, not the least of which is that someone like me would actually get excited and use it. So it turns out there's literally a White House policy now barring crazy women from wearing fluorescent blue computers on their faces at the White House because of me. And I'm so proud. But the reason I was wearing it is because I had built myself a superpower. Because my son has type 1 diabetes, and boy, I could string the story out. I already have, but essentially I was just shocked. This was 11 years ago, coming up on 12 years ago. I was just shocked that type 1 diabetes was still being treated by people handwriting numbers on sheets of paper and then staring at them and coming up with, maybe we should do this. And so I hacked all of his medical equipment. Turns out I broke all sorts of federal laws, which I then got to actually confess to the President of the United States. I hope he doesn't have any enforcement powers. So, and I built the first ever AI for diabetes. And I built this thing for my child. And I would wish for any parent, mother, father, or anything else you want to think of yourself, to be that person, that unique person that could truly make a difference in your child's life, because it is the most amazing feeling. But I also got to tell this lovely man about it, and I think he still thought I was a nut job, but he was impressed. And we also got to build a system that could read facial expressions. By the way, I learned how to do that as an undergrad with money from the CIA. So they wanted to build a real-time lie detection system off of raw video. This is 1999. And I got to be a part of that, which is, it's a little morally gray, but it was cool as hell. My undergraduate honors project, thesis, was a neural network that could find your philtrum, if you don't know that word, there's your word of the day, and your pupils, and tell if you were smiling or not. And I was hooked. I just thought that was amazing. And the fact that I got to use that, in this case, to help autistic children learn how to read facial expressions as they were interacting naturally with other people in their lives, or that I got to later build a system to treat diabetes. Or, in fact, we took that face model many years later and were approached by a project for the UN's Millennial Cities Initiative to help reunite orphan refugees with their extended family members. There's literally a book with 1 million photographs in it, and it's every orphan kid in a refugee camp somewhere in the world. And if you showed up at a camp looking for your niece, they give you a book and you start leafing through it. And we made this thing, this almost a game on a tablet, and you'd look for someone who looks more like your niece and pick the kids that kind of look a little bit more like her. And if she's in a camp anywhere in the world, in about 3 to 5 minutes, you found her. So I've had this chance to do something that felt important, felt like I made a difference in someone's life, whether it was diabetes or autism or the worst experience you could possibly imagine, being alone in a refugee camp outside a war zone. And I'm going to be selfish about it. It's addictive. It is an amazing thing to have that feeling that you made a difference, whether you did it with artificial intelligence or you did it through organizing or political action or just crunching the numbers to figure out how is somebody going to pay for this. Having that opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives matter, which is why now I have the coolest job in the whole world. People send me problems. Dr. Ming, my daughter has 500 seizures a day. Please save her life. Dr. Ming, I suffer from postpartum depression, and I'm scared of having another child. Dr. Ming, our company, what is the biggest driver that we're not tracking? The biggest driver of productivity inside our company of 500,000 people. And if I think my team and I can say anything unique and meaningful about it, I pay for everything, and whatever we invent, we just give away. Turns out it is the worst startup idea ever. Infinite demand, no revenue, but the lovely thing is my life allows me to do this. And I would wish for all of you to have an equally terrible startup where you just got to spend every day trying to help. Because that is the most meaningful thing. I usually close with this line sometimes, but I recently, just out of curiosity, worked out how many data points I have analyzed across my career, rough scale. And it came out to about 9.7 trillion data points. And if there was one single story that came through all of that, it is that if you want an amazing life, you have to give it to someone else. It is the most reliable path to transforming yourself. All right, another story. In 2008, my wife and I are both faculty at Berkeley. She's in education, I'm at the Redwood Center for Theoretical Neuroscience, and if that sounds like a made-up place, it's not far off. Theoretical neuroscience just means you make fake brains on computers and pretend to be a scientist. So we have this idea of mashing up a little bit of my machine learning, artificial intelligence with her education research and coming up with, we sort of asked ourselves, is this an experiment or is this a startup? And we decided we could reach more people if we did it as a startup. And we built this technology and even published some papers, because that's the way you do a business, right? You publish papers. So we actually found that we could listen to students talk to one another. And from that, what we showed in the papers was we could actually, in week 1, we know what grade undergrads would get in the class, just from free-form conversations. But obviously the point is for that to not come true. Whoever that kid is, what is something unique to them that would transform that educational experience? What is the thing that for a kid like that would make, whether they were headed towards failing the class or just getting an A, could transform it into something even more powerful? So we launched this company, and this is not a story about ed tech. This is a story about my first experience raising money from venture capitalists. So my wife and I are going out and talking to VCs. There's this road in the Bay Area called Sand Hill Road that famously all of the VCs have their offices on, and we're going up and down and meeting with everyone, and they all love the technology. As one venture capitalist put it, you can read students' minds, which is frankly about as much as any venture capitalist understands about AI even today. But you know, this is 2008, and they think it's amazing, and he says, wow, here's $2 million if you do financial fraud detection, and I've got the perfect CEO. Just note that I am the CEO, literally sitting across the table from him. He would only give the money if he could fire me. And I remember the first time we ever pitched a full vote partner meeting. And it was 5 guys, small firm. By the way, 5 guys. Nice thing is I don't have to raise money anymore. Once you do make money for someone, it gets a lot easier. But that first time was brutal. And across, all right, and across, now I can move around. And across the many firms that I've raised money for students of mine that have asked me to be on their boards, or for anyone else, I have never pitched a woman that had a vote as to whether I get funded. I mean, dozens and dozens of senior partner venture capitalists, not a single woman. I know a few, and it has changed, but it's still like 1 out of every 10 VCs you meet is actually a woman, and they control vastly less capital. So we go in and finally get someone to vote on whether to fund us. And if you've ever been in this experience before, it is brutal. The first guy asks a tough question, and he should. He's spending someone else's money. He's got a fiduciary responsibility to really kick the tires. And then the next guy asks a brutal question. And then the next guy, just sort of an eviscerating question. And then the 4th guy is like, Jesus, what did ever I do to your family? And then you get to the 5th guy, and he just pats me on the head. He says, you should be so proud of what you've invented. And at the time, let me share how naive. At the time I thought, gee, at least one guy's on my side. So let's flash forward a few years. I'm watching a TED Talk. I highly recommend it. The title is Why Do All Ambitious Women Have Flat Heads? Dame Stephanie Shirley, bam. And I'm going to ruin it because the punchline is, as she says, in the talk, why do all ambitious women? It's from all the time men pat you on the head and say you should be so proud. And I was like, that's what that mother said to me. Well, we are in the future, and you are all intelligent people, and most of you women, so you already know what the punchline of this story is. He was the one guy that voted against funding us. And what I've come to understand, of course, is that if I'm interacting with someone, even now in my early 50s, and I feel like this is my uncle, this is a guy that, he just wants to humor me and bounce me on his knee, that this is not someone who's taking me seriously as a business person. And fortunately now, again, I get to roll in with reputation. I'm the one that gets to say no to things. But early on, it was so hard. And working hard to achieve what you want, to grow, absolutely. Working extra hard just to prove who you are, what you can already do. How many young, amazing women have a world-transforming startup or social mission or whatever it might be in their heart and in their head, but all of that additional effort drives them out. So the one thing that was curious about this for me is it wasn't actually the first time I've started a company. The first time I started a company was 15-ish years before that. 15 years before that, I didn't have 2 PhDs. 15 years before that, I didn't know anything about artificial intelligence. I didn't have a co-founder and spouse with fancy, Stanford and Harvard and Berkeley and Carnegie Mellon. Like, we had a lot going for us. 15 years before, I was a few months from ending up homeless. I'd flunked out of university and had no experience or qualifications whatsoever. And I wanted to start a film company. We called it Hard Drive Productions. Believe it or not, it was not a porn company. We were doing digital editing, hard drive. In the 90s, that would have sounded kind of cool. So we wanted to make like low-budget sci-fi things, which nobody should fund. Even if you know what you're doing, that is a bad business plan. And yet, I was able to put together a round of financing to make a movie with no background or skills. And you may wonder what was different. Why was it so easy with no qualifications and so hard with exquisite qualifications? Well, there was one other thing that was wildly different, which was my first time around, I was a man. And the second time around, I was a woman. In between, I'd gone through gender transition when I was a scientist at Cal and Stanford. Which was, by the way, I have to recommend, estrogen is the greatest drug ever invented. I highly recommend it. Want to know why companies with more female executives and female board members tend to earn more? One of the biggest drivers of that is the negative effects of all-male boards. The principal finding there is that all-male boards are vastly more likely to preside over either a catastrophic acquisition or just straight-up malfeasance. So I can report estrogen kind of takes that out of you. I don't have something to prove, so I don't need to balls up and try and beat the market somehow. But having that experience of how wildly differently the world will treat you, that the same notional person, and yet there's this transformation. The first day I was ever in my own lab, and let me say, my transition was a celebration. It's one of the nice things about doing it in academia, as a faculty member. I had one student, this great young Chinese man, and I was a little worried. Like, I got to be a spy on the other side and hear the occasional off-color joke and think, all right, how are they going to respond when they discover what's going on here? And again, he was great. He was an engineer. It wasn't like he said, oh, I love you and hugs. No, they don't do that. But it was, I showed up that day and it was just the idea you had worked. Let's get back to work. But I will also say, the first day I showed up in my own lab, last day anyone ever asked me a math question. So if you've ever wondered, or if anyone has ever told you, it's all in your head, no one's treating you different than anyone else. Again, for the kids, I will calm my foul mouth. But no, that is simply not true. Of course we can see it in data. Amongst my 9.7 trillion data points, we can clearly see it in the data. There's this famous data point that if you're a labor economist, and I think there might be a few in this town, if you're a labor economist, it's almost a rite of passage to do a paper on wage gap, particularly gender wage gap. It's just something you kind of do in passing. And interestingly enough, whether you're from the most conservative side of the political spectrum or the most liberal, the finding is largely the same. Gender wage gap is driven by the different choices women make than men in the workplace. More specifically, women choose to work fewer hours. And there is a lot of data to support that. And I've looked at it and said a couple of things. One, if you're not accounting for sexual harassment, then I'm not quite certain what your models are meant to explain. Like, we account for virtually all the variance in the data, but we're not accounting for, handsy producers in Hollywood, then I think your data, your model's explaining too much of the variance. Even in my personal experience with this face, I still know what that means. Having conversations with people talking to your chest starting at age 35 is a pretty interesting experience. But the other thing that I found so disturbing about it is that the end of the story? Women choose to, why did they make this choice? What is this the magical thing you think is happening that there's just out of nowhere, women are making a choice? They worked incredibly hard the whole way through school, got into an elite university, worked their ass off. I can actually quantify it, about twice as hard as the guy next to them, to get that job, the dream job at the company, and then suddenly you decided, you know what, I don't really like doing emails on the weekend. And that makes no sense to me. So I thought, let's take this a step farther. I had data on about 122 million people that covered roughly 60,000 companies. And I thought, what if we built a bunch of AIs and I crawled to the websites of every one of those companies? And I looked at the employees and I looked at their quarterly reports and their websites, and we did facial analysis, since the CIA kindly taught me how to do that, to identify who makes up their boards and their C-suites. The punchline is, if you just want the single biggest linear predictor of wage gap, then it's how many female faces are on the leadership team. More women on the leadership team, smaller wage gap. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I thought this was just women's choices. In fact, there shouldn't be any difference between companies if it's just women making choices, but for random noise, it should be the same everywhere. But it very much wasn't. In fact, once we look deeper, by the way, you see almost literally the exact same phenomenon with kids coming from backgrounds where their families don't go to university, but they are star students, similarly seeming to choose to not go to elite universities, seemingly choosing to not apply for scholarships. But we saw the exact same phenomenon. When you had the evidence in your life that your hard work would pay off, don't you think you could go to MIT and pass the classes? Of course I can, but what's the point? I'm just gonna end up back in the neighborhood or back on the farm. Don't you think you could be an amazing executive at this company you dreamed of working at? Of course I can, but all of the executives are men, or pretty damn close to it. Well, no matter how hard I work, why would I truly believe that hard work will pay off? When those young women and those young students have the evidence, the role models that show them truly someone like them can actually put in that hard work and it will transform their lives, suddenly they choose to work harder. Not work harder, devote the work to this classic. Otherwise, hey, I can put that work into my church. I can put that work into my relationships, into a nonprofit that I want to support. Everybody's going to work hard on something. But are they going to work hard on this thing that we seemingly value, our careers? Well, if their whole life tells them it won't pay off, then they make a rational choice. and put that hard work in another place. And what's interesting when it comes to kids, I know this is International Women's Day, but let's talk about how universal this is. This is my dad. My dad grew up a sharecropper in Kansas. He was the smartest kid in all of Kansas, literally, which back in the day probably meant more people than it is today. So he's out of some farm in nowhere, like Dorothy has never heard of the town he's from. And he gets full scholarships everywhere, and he doesn't go. My grandparents are like, what's the point of going to some technical school halfway across the country, MIT? You know, we've got a solid ag school right here. So he went to KU, tutored Wilt Chamberlain in chemistry, you know, the famous chemist. And then spent the rest of his life feeling like he'd never lived up to his potential. And I was supposed to take that torch and move it forward, getting to grow up in California instead of on a farm in Kansas and do something with my life. And yet, as I've already indicated, it very quickly ended up with homelessness and a real sense of failure, having let everyone down. And what I came to understand from time wondering where my next meal would come from or why I should even be alive was I can live a life that makes other people's lives better. That's the only thing that is truly meaningful. And the reason I bring this up, a universal truth on International Women's Day, is, I'm sure at some point here I'm supposed to shut the hell up, but I want to bring up two more things, two projects I've gotten to work on. The first is this giant company came to me. I alluded to this already. What's the single biggest driver of productivity inside our company? That may not sound like a philanthropic project to you, but to me, as long as they're okay that I get to share everything we discover, and I get to do it as a mad scientist, then yeah, absolutely. And the company had 500,000 employees, or pretty close to it. So long before COVID, I got to do contact tracing inside a global company. 70,000 people participated, and I got to see all of their interactions, all their conversations, who hung out at the water cooler, everything. If someone here wanted to hear me talk about AI and ethics, this should be setting off alarm bells right now. The good thing is I just tell them up front, I'm a horrible person, just assume I will abuse all of your data. No, so we didn't share anything back with the employer. So one of the nice things about my work is I get to work on these fraught things. I get to go into complicated spaces to try and understand what's going on. And in this particular case, it paid off. What was the single biggest driver of productivity? We'd see this person, let's call them person A, and they'd meet with person 1, 2, and 3. And 1, 2, and 3, who are on different divisions, different projects, completely unrelated, they all got more productive when they spent time with person A. Their whole teams got more productive. We'd see these individuals, and then we could monitor their conversations. And what we'd see is they helped. They just helped other people. You might say they made sacrifices, even though it didn't benefit themselves. Literally, we would see no evidence that they did this in a way which advanced their career, maybe socially it benefited them, but it was not part of their job. They just helped other people. And it was the single biggest driver of productivity inside Accenture. So we run a bunch of psychological tests, and we find the psychological construct most strongly associated with this behavior was a sense of purpose. So the technical definition in psychology would be something that's bigger than you, something that takes more than a lifetime to complete. The metaphor I always enjoy using is the world gets better when old men plant trees. They're never going to rest under its shade. And yet, the world gets better, clearly. In this case, we see Accenture gets better. But here's two important details. One is almost a paradox. Their lives are better. They have more friends. they earn more money, they go further in their education, all-cause mortality drops. Their insulin sensitivity, central body, everything you'd want to be true about you when you're 65 is more likely to be true of these people that help other people. What an amazing thing. And it is equally true for men and women, but it is more common to be part of the behavioral repertoire of women. Maybe it's because of how women are raised or enculturated, maybe it is estrogen, but whatever the case, we see clearly that this benefits men as well, but it is so much more common in women to just help because there's something bigger than you telling you to do it, and yet it pays off in your life. This is an amazing thing, an amazing finding, to know that even though so many things are set out against you, maybe a glass ceiling is the wrong way of thinking about it, but as I often put it, there's this tax that literally all of us pay, but the burden of it falls on those least able to pay it. And it is the tax on being different. The literal additional dollars, but so much more, that costs you to be a woman, to be black, to be queer, whatever it is. And it's a different kind of a tax in different places in the world. But it's there, and it's real. We actually measured it and found being named Jose instead of Joe costs you about $750,000 in the US tech industry. Being a lesbian in tech starts to get expensive. So that is one project. First, because it speaks to something that we see that's different, not unique to women, but different at a population level, and how women engage with the world versus men. And it speaks to some of my experience with transition. This is a little off the cuff and off topic, but there's a lot of laws suddenly getting passed, and about a decade of both parties using someone like me as a wedge. And is it genetics? Is it biological? I don't care. I have one single question for anyone that wants to go through transition, and let me make clear, any kind of life transition, any change you want to make about yourself. Are you a better person? It's the only question that interests me. And if you are a better person, then your transition should be a celebration. That's the only thing. When life was hard for me, and I needed to find a way out and back into a course where I could affect the world, I just thought, maybe I'm never going to be happy, but I could be a better person. And that's what I tried to bring into the world. And I want to close with one new project that I'm involved in. And I'm using it, I think you'll see, for obvious reasons, because it is a problem that is universal, which is to say, it affects everyone in the world. It is a problem which is well known. It's a plot of famous novels, and yet gets neglected. I mean, profoundly neglected. And that is postpartum depression. There are a number of challenges that women face in health. Postpartum depression, perimenopausal depression, menstrual dysphoric disorder, and in fact, even Alzheimer's occurs at a higher rate in women than men. And a lot of this is driven by the unique hormonal milieu of women. And yet it is the policy in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia. This is terrible. In fact, we can literally quantify it. Cost in 2017, it cost the United States of America societally $14.2 billion. Direct treatment, preterm complications, loss of productivity, impacts on the kids. But we shrug and say, this is terrible, and you know what? Whenever we detect it, we'll send you to group therapy. So I thought, this is nuts. We could do something so much more meaningful than that. And we took some language models, using deep neural networks to understand the natural language that people use, originally built to predict suicide risk of kids on Twitter. And we mashed it up with some epigenetic models that look at parts of your genome that have been activated versus not. And we can see, often case in young women that have never been pregnant, their risk of postpartum depression. And this is a classic case of, one, complicated AI ethics. Are we listening to everyone? What will we do with that information? How does it get stored? How does it get stored when there are attorney generals right now that want to subpoena that data and prosecute women who make complex decisions about their own bodies and their pregnancies? But also, how could we say no when we know that saying no also means that people will die, that lives will be ruined in many cases? So we built this system, and we're about to release it out into the world. And because I'm a nerd, I ran some economic models. We think, in an idealized world, we could trim $10 billion off that $14 billion societal cost, $4 billion of which is actual direct treatment, like make, the insurers happy about actually being able to use this stuff. Why pay for treatment after the fact when we could identify ahead of time, but the only way we could do it safely is essentially to put our money where our mouth is. So we started a data trust. It's a nonprofit. It owns all of our clients' data, purely with the fiduciary responsibility to them. We couldn't sell this data if we wanted to. If we can change the course of someone's life that would otherwise have struggled with postpartum depression, perimenopausal depression, that's it. That's my value add to the world. Why do I need to sell it off for ads or political targeting? We've made the meaningful difference that could transform someone's life. And in this particular case, something we're all aware of, and yet our healthcare system has punted on. And lovely, the NIH has just given us a big grant to move forward with this project, which is super exciting. But this is what it means to be able to live a life that makes other people's lives better. This is what it means to be able to be yourself in the world. And I don't think it's unique to women. But I do think that for a million reasons, women have this currently a deep part of our connection with the world, is this idea that it's about more than just us. So I know I've probably gone a little long, and I've stopped telling funny jokes, if any of them ever were. But I'm going to close here with a simple request. We'll have our panel, and we will talk extensively about the challenges and the impacts of being women in science and technology and in the business world. And we will, I hope many of us, particularly younger people here, will feel empowered, and you'll feel like it's your chance to do something. So let me ask you to do the following. And the great thing is you don't have to wait. You can get started immediately, this afternoon, this evening. My request to you is that you go home tonight, back to your hotel, whatever it might be, and you plant a tree. Find something in this world, something you can uniquely transform, and without expecting anything back, plant a tree. And I promise you, however scary that may feel, it will come back to you. all the good things in my life. The fact that some woman made the terrible choice of falling in love with me, that I get to do this crazy job, that people at buildings nearby listen to what I have to say. I genuinely believe, as close to mysticism as a hard number scientist gets, they're the gifts from having made the right choices in my life. And I strongly encourage you, however terrifying it may sometimes feel, this is your chance. Every day is your chance. Please plant a tree. Thank you.